So you want to know what it's like living in the mountains? Come on.
We're Callie and Spencer, ski bums, travel junkies, van life, and everything in between. Follow along and subscribe to join us on all of our adventures.
So you want to live in the mountains? Of course you do. I'm surprised you're not already here, honestly. Callie and I have spent the last 2 years here in Summit County, and we love it. I'm here to talk to you guys about the 5 best things about living in the mountains. Of course, there are some drawbacks, and Callie's going to get to that, but I'm just going to talk about the 5 top best parts about living in the mountains. Access to the mountains. We love living in the mountains because we have access right out our back door to go hiking, biking, skiing, backpacking, run Darcy around everywhere. It's right outside our back door. For instance, if you're working at home or you have a job here next to the mountain, oftentimes during your lunch break or whenever you have a second, you can just go outside and be right in nature. Sometimes you can go ahead and take your skis out, take a couple laps on the mountain, and that's the best lunch break I've ever had. Kind of like what I was just talking about, number 2, I like to think of Colorado as the adult playground. It's so fun out here for adults. We have so many things to do out here that you just don't have enough time and money to possibly do. I like to say it like this. Keeping up with the Joneses factor out here is not who has the bigger house, who has the nicer stuff. It's how many sports you do and how many sports you can afford to participate in at the same time. The 2 biggest ones are skiing and biking, and just to get into those sports at the base level is at very minimum price is going to cost you hundreds of dollars, and when you get up into the upper tiers, you're talking about thousands of dollars and tens of $1,000 mountain bikes, and it just takes a long time to earn all of that money to get into those sports. So if you're moving up here, do not feel bad about not being able to do all of the sports at once. There's all kinds of rental gear that you can get until you get into the sport enough that you've decided that you want to invest that kind of money. I have spent the last 2 years accumulating some money to get a new mountain bike and to get new skis and a new snowboard, and it just takes time. We all have our individual budgets, and you gotta stick to it. Number 3 is the town. We live in the town of Breckenridge, and I've seen a lot of other towns in the mountains, but honestly, personally, I think that the town of Breckenridge is the best town up in the mountains. At least in our area, in Summit County, you can have an argument for anything, and this is just my opinion, but Breck has the nicest town feeling to it. It has this mom and pop feel with these lovely boutique shopping areas, and then we don't have any chain restaurants. They're all locally owned and operated with delicious food. I can hardly even think of one that doesn't have delicious food here. The other part about living in Breck is it's straight in the middle of the price range in mountain towns. On the high end, you have Aspen and Vail, which are where the 1%ers really live and own houses there. Breckenridge is a little bit more affordable. It is still very expensive as mountain towns go, but best bang for the buck, I think Breckenridge is the best town in the mountains. Number 4, the people here. The community in Breckenridge is really something else. So there's a number of different ways you can get to Breckenridge. Usually people start by coming up for their first season. They want to ski more, they want to do a local job, they just want to ski as much as possible, and that's totally fine. And sometimes you really like it and you stay, and sometimes it's not worth it to you and you leave, and that's also okay. But if you're going to stay here more than 5 years, I think that's the point where you really become a true local. If you have 5 years under your belt, then you kind of know everybody who lives around here, it's honestly a little bit difficult to get yourself into that locals community because we're so tight knit here that we know that there's so many people that are transient who are coming and going all the time. Some people stay for 1 or 2 seasons and then decide that this kind of lifestyle is not really for them. And everybody who's a local here kind of understands that, which makes it a little bit harder for newer people coming to the community who want to make friends and make a community, a little bit harder to get into that community because you just haven't spent the time here, and a lot of those locals aren't willing to spend that time getting to know you because you might just leave in a couple months. The other part though is that once you get into that community, once you join a gym, once you have some kind of link to the people who actually live here, it's really tight knit. There's really not that many people who live here year round full time, and you really get to start to know each other, and everybody is very friendly when you kind of knock down that first wall and get to know more people. So the community here, A+, but it just takes a little bit of time to get in there. So take it one step at a time and don't try to rush it all. Finally, our 5th point, mountain living. Mountain living is my kind of living, honestly. I love it up here because we don't really have like a dress code. People don't dress up in nice clothes. We wear our winter boots and our jackets, and there's people mostly wearing jeans and leggings, and if you see somebody wearing high heels, you obviously know that they're already not from around here. The next thing is that people in Breckenridge and in the mountains work to live, not live to work. We really have that work-life balance down. Like, we will work really hard, but you know, as soon as 3 or 4 comes around, we're wrapping up for the day. We're getting done. We have other things going on. We have to meet up for mountain bike riding with our friends. We're going out the last hour on the ski hill with some buddies, or we're meeting people for dinner or going out. Like, we are mountain living up here. It's not all about work. We're not working until 8 p.m. Like, it's all about keeping your life in order of, like, we live up here so that we can be outside. And that is our main priority. We love to work, but we also like to play a lot too. Now, I know we just talked about a lot of the best things in the mountains of Colorado, but Callie is here to tell you a little bit about the downsides. There's always some downsides, but they're not too bad.
So Spencer told you about all of the fun, exciting things about living in the mountains, and it is. We love having the mountains in our backyard. However, it's not always just like being on vacation all the time. There are some downsides and some hardships to living in the mountains. Now, the number one downside to living up here is going to be housing situation. So housing is not only very, very expensive, it is hard to find, and it most often does not allow your furry friends to come with. So when you are coming up here and you want to find a place to live, make sure you are finding a place by August at the latest. We have so many people who come in for seasonal positions, and they are taking up the housing for sure. A lot of the owners of condos, houses, stuff like that are doing short-term rentals and not long-term rentals. So you will find people renting for a week, 2 weeks, something like that, not really looking to rent out their place for a few months or for even a year because they're not going to make as much money off of it. If you guys are finding a place to live up here, expect to pay around $2,000 for a 1-bedroom, probably minimum. And a lot of the HOA rules up here do not allow any pets. So if you have an in with someone, that's definitely awesome. Or if you're coming up here for a seasonal position, a lot of mountain jobs do offer employee housing, which is your cheapest option. It's definitely dorm style living where you're living with someone else, probably in your room with you and a couple other people in the actual apartment, but it's definitely going to be your cheapest option. Now, if you're coming up here and you want to buy a place to live because the housing situation is so hard to find a place to rent, you're looking at probably around $500,000. minimum, unless you literally want a studio that's like 300 square feet. So if you're looking at a 1-bedroom condo or something around those lines, you're looking at probably $400,000 to $600,000, not including your HOA fees on top of that. So definitely keep that in mind. It is pricey to live up here, but it's also worth it. Something that's super challenging about living up here is going to be the job situation. So we do have a lot of people who live up here who have remote work, especially after COVID. Most people are working remote, and they came up here and found a place to live and are doing their work remotely, which is wonderful. However, if you ever want to switch jobs, or if you want to come up here, start fresh, get a job up here, that is awesome, and there are lots of opportunities for that, but maybe not what you're thinking. Most of the jobs up here are going to be geared towards tourists, right? So a lot of it is going to be tours. It's going to be anything on the mountain, like ski school, lift operations, those type of jobs. Working in a rental shop, working in a souvenir shop, something like that. We also have a ton of bars, ton of restaurants, so there are a lot of opportunities to be a server or a bartender. However, if you're someone like me and you are looking for more of a corporate type of job, you can find them. They're just a little bit few and far between. So your main options would be working for the town or the government. It would be working for the ski resort. There's only a few corporate jobs up here because our corporate office is going to be down in Broomfield, which is kind of the Boulder area. But besides that, we don't have a ton of corporate jobs. So your best bet is going to be maybe getting a seasonal job, working your way up, or working an hourly position until you can maybe find something either remote or something a little bit more permanent. So it's a plus and a minus. There's lots of opportunities, but maybe not with the pay that you're looking for. If you are someone who hates the cold, living in the mountains is probably not for you. Just so you're aware, it does snow 10 out of the 12 months up in the mountains, especially in a town like Breckenridge. We get a ton of snowfall every year. We have tons and tons of feet on the ground of snow in the prime of the winter time, and it will snow probably until very late May, maybe even early June, and it will start snowing again in September, most likely. The summers are beautiful, and they're warm, and they are dry, so it's not super humid and hot. However, snow consumes most of our year here. So if you are someone who hates the cold, I really hope that if you're considering to move here, that you love snow sports, something like skiing, snowboarding, or something like that. I'm from Chicago, so I know how cold it can be, but I love it here because the sun is always shining. So that's one perk to the snow is it's 30 degrees out right now, but it feels a little bit more like 45 just because the sun is shining. So number 4 downside is going to be you are kind of far away from real life. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. If you're someone like me who came from living in a city before this, you had lots of access to pretty much any grocery store you wanted to go to, any type of gym you wanted to go to, shops, malls, all of that kind of stuff. In the mountains, things are a little bit more few and far between, right? So most of our activities up here, most of our shops up here, all of those types of things are made specifically for tourists because it is a tourist town. So we don't have malls or any really big shops. Most of our shops are going to be just mountain gear, or it's going to be souvenirs that are geared towards the tourists, right? We do have gyms, obviously, but it's not like I could find this specific type of yoga or this specific type of Pilates or this specific type of weightlifting or something like that, right? We have a few gyms in town and we have a big rec center, but you're not going to find as much of those boutique studios like you would in a big city. We will normally drive an hour and 20 minutes down to Denver to go to Costco or to go to Trader Joe's. Definitely, we get a little bit sick of City Market up here, but especially with all the crowds. But Denver's super close up here, so we can't complain too bad about that we have access to that. Number 5, and probably one of the most challenging things up here, is going to be the tourists. Now, wait, because you're probably a tourist, so don't get too offended really quick, because we are tourists as well, or we used to be before we moved up here. And we used to vacation up here and do all of the fun things that all of the tourists up here do. However, something to keep in mind is that during the winter time and some of those weekends during the summertime, it gets busy. And what I mean by busy is 3 or 4 hour lines for restaurants. If you want to wait in a lift line, which would on a normal day maybe go for 5 minutes maximum, you're probably looking at around an hour. waiting in the freezing cold to get up the mountain. It's impossible to drive around because there's so much traffic. For example, it's currently the week between Christmas and New Year's, and it usually takes us around 4 minutes to get to the grocery store. It took us 45 minutes just yesterday to do that. So the crowds are insane. If you are a tourist and you are looking to come here, come at an off time, not during spring break time, not during Christmas time, none of those big holidays, because you will get so much more bang for your buck. But it's hard for the locals, right? Because we have a harder time getting around. We can't go to the restaurants that we like, right? So usually the locals around these times will kind of hermit down and they won't really go out that much. So we have not gone skiing this entire week. We have tried to not go to the grocery store or do any of those big things because it gets so incredibly crowded. We are so grateful for the tourists because they do really help the economy. They give people so many jobs up here. Obviously, there's so many activities for tourists to do and so many fun things. It can just be a lot, especially if you're mountain people who are trying to get away from the crowds.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Next week, we're headed to Taos, New Mexico. We'll see you there.